Good day, everyone. We are the students of New Era University, and we're going to discuss the summary proceedings in family courts. As legal practitioners, law students, or even citizens seeking a better understanding on how justice is dispensed efficiently, this topic is very crucial. Family courts play a vital role in safeguarding the interests of families, children, and individuals, ensuring that justice is accessible and recognizing that certain cases demand swift resolution and avoid prolonged litigations. This special set of rules making legal remedies for more attainable for all. In this lecture, we will focus rather on the application of the rules of summary procedure within the family courts. I will provide the overview of this purpose, coverage, and unique aspects that distinguish it from regular rules. So let's proceed on the general overview of the summary procedure. The summary procedure is designed to simplify and expedite the resolution of certain cases without sacrificing due process. It reflects the judiciary's commitment to providing swift justice, especially in disputes where prolonged litigation could exacerbate famil- familial conflicts or harm vulnerable parties such as children. So in this area, the procedure is characterized by less formalistic hearings, simplified pleadings, and fewer procedural requirements, making it less consuming and more accessible to the parties involved. The key features in this summary procedures are the rules eliminating procedural delays by limiting the filing of pleadings and motions and streamlining the hearings. Cases are resolved based primarily on affidavits, and documentary evidence, minimizing courtroom confrontation and with limited scope. Next, we have the legislative mandate. So the summary proceedings in family courts includes the laws in Family Code of the Philippines, Republic Act 8369 or the Family Courts Act of 1997, revised rules on summary procedure, constitutional bases such as Article 2, Section 12, and the Article 15, Section 3. This will be further discussed by my teammate. On the extent and limitation to jurisdiction.
Thank you, Ms. Bactin. Now I am Mary Louise M. Moyano, and I will be discussing the extent, limitations, and natures of proceedings within family courts in the Philippines under the Family Court Act of 1997. Now let's start with jurisdiction. Under Section 5 of the Family Courts Act of 1997, family courts have exclusive original jurisdiction over a wide range of cases involving children's families. That includes criminal cases involving minors, petitions for guardianship, child custody and adoption, annulment of marriage, domestic violence that is against women and children. The family court's specialized jurisdiction ensures that cases impacting family and children are given the attention they need. Now, if a family court is not available, the Act has had transitory provision in Section 17 that allows designated regional trial courts or RTCs to hear these cases. However, it is important to note that family court have jurisdiction only over cases directly involving family or children's welfare, and they cannot rule on unrelated matters as they are authority to strictly limited to what is granted by law. Also, if a family-related issue comes up incidentally in a different case in a regular court, the court can address it as part of the broader case. Now, for the nature of proceeding, this court or the family courts operate under a unique set of guidelines that designed to be a child-sensitive, family-centered, and protective of privacy as outlined in Section 12. The hearings are conducted in ways that uphold the dignity of children and families, and confidentiality is maintained at all stages of the process. To support this, the Supreme Court also has developed special rules to make sure that the child's best interests are always prioritized. And this is aligned with the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of Children, ensuring global standards are met in the Philippine courts. Now let's discuss the quantum of evidence or the standard of proof required in family court cases. Under Rule 113 of the Rules of Course, in most civil cases, the standard is preponderance of evidence, meaning that the evidence must show that it's more likely than not the claim is true. For protective orders under VAUSI Act of 2004 or the Violence Against Women and Children Act, the required evidence level is often clear and convincing evidence due to the serious nature and potential impacts of these cases. And finally, let's look at due process requirements in family courts and appeals. The due process is central to the family courts, which in Section 14, it guarantees the right to appeal decisions that allows the parties to seek a review if they believe a decision was unfair. And for judicial or for juvenile offenders, due process protections are especially strong, and juvenile offenders are separated from adult offenders and provided alternatives to detention to support their rehabilitations. And to aid the families in resolving cases, the Act also incorporates cases to social services counseling and other forms of support in accordance to Section 9 to 10 of the Family Courts Act of 1997. Now, to continue the discussion, let us hear from Ms. Mangila on the rules of procedure and related forms.
Thank you, Ms. Moyano. Uh, Hi, my name is Rosel Joy C. Mangila, who will discuss the rules of procedures in summary proceedings and family court. So, rules of procedures in family court. First, a verified petition which must be submitted to the court. When a husband and a wife are separated in fact, or one has abandoned the other, or one of them seeks judicial authorization for transaction where the consent of the other spouse is required by law, but such consent is held or cannot be obtained, a verified petition may be filed in court alleging the foregoing facts. So, a petition shall attach the proposed deed, if any, embodying the transaction, and if none, shall describe in details the said transaction and state the reason why the required consent thereto cannot be secured. In any case, the final deed duly executed by the party shall be submitted to and approved by the court. To add, claim for damages by either spouse except cause of the proceedings may be litigated only in a separate action. Second, regional trial court or its equivalent gains jurisdiction over the petition if it's located in the area where either of the spouses resides. Here, the jurisdiction over the petition shall, upon proof of notice to the other spouse, be exercised by the proper court authorized to hear family cases. If one exists, or in the regional trial court or its equivalent sitting in the place where either of the spouses resides. Third, the court will notify the other spouse and provide them with a copy of the petition. So upon filing of the petition, the court shall notify the other spouse whose consent to the transaction is required of the said petition, ordering said spouse to show cause why the petition should not be granted on or before the date set in the said notice for the initial conference. The notice shall be accompanied by the copy of the petition and shall be served at the last known address of the spouse concerned. Fourth is a preliminary conference shall be conducted. So a preliminary conference shall be conducted by a judge personally without the parties, being assisted by the counsel. After the initial trial, if the court deems it useful, the parties may be assisted by counsel at the succeeding conference and hearing. So, in case of non-appearance of the spouse whose consent is sought, the court shall inquire into the reasons for his failure to appear and shall require such appearance if possible. So this if, despite all efforts, the attendance of non-consenting spouse is not secured, the court may proceed ex parte and render the judgment as the judicial facts and circumstances that may warrant. Uh, Fifth, the petition remains unsolved, it will be decided through a summary hearing. So if the petition is not resolved in an initial conference, the said petition shall be decided in a summary hearings on the basis of affidavits, documentary evidence, or oral testimonies at the sound discretion of the court. If the testimony is needed, the court shall specify the witnesses to be heard and the subject matter of their testimonies, directing the parties to present said witnesses. Uh, Six, the court decision shall be immediately final and executable. So here, the judgment of the court shall be immediately and final and executory. To add, uh, the petition for judicial authority to administer or encumber specific separate property of the abandoning spouse and to use the fruits of or proceeds thereof for the supports of the family shall also be governed by this rule. So further, in the incidents involving parental authority, petitions filed under Article 223, 225, and 235 of the Family Code involving parental authority shall be verified. Such petition shall be verified and filed in the proper courts of the place where the child resides. Upon the filing of the petition, the court shall notify the parents or in their absence or incapacity, the individuals and entities or institution exercising parental authority over the child. Then after, the rules in chapter on above mentioned shall also govern the summary proceedings under this code insofar as they are applicable. So uh, you can access the sources of our topic through the link provided on your screen for further guidance. And lastly, you can view the related forms for this topic by scanning the QR code, which will help you to familiarize yourself with the summary proceedings in the family court. So that concludes our discussion on the summary proceedings in family court. Thank you all and have a great day.